Hey there, welcome to our session, 21st Century Literature from the Philippines and the World, Quarter 1, Week 3 to 4, 21st Century Literary Genres Mr. Jeffer Mark Vlog. 21st Century Literature from the Philippines and the World, Quarter 1, Week 3 to 4, 21st Century Literary Genres, Teacher, Jeffer Mark T. Mijares. 21st Century Literature. 21st century literature refers to new literary work created within the last decade. It is written by contemporary authors which may deal with current themes/issues and reflects a technological culture. It often breaks traditional writing rules. 21st century reader. A 21st century reader grew up using technology as a primary learning tool. He is capable of navigating and interpreting digital formats and media messages. She also possesses literacy skills, which include technological abilities such as keyboarding, internet navigation, interpretation of technological speak, ability to communicate and interpret coded language and decipher graphics. Conventional/major literary genres. A genre is a broad term that translates from the French to mean kind or type. In entertainment, this can translate to horror, romance, science fiction, etc. In general, these types differ for all sorts of reasons, from the actions in their plots to the feelings they elicit from the audience. However, in literature, there are some more defined genres. It is important to know which genre a piece of work falls into because the reader will already have certain expectations before he even begins to read. These are the types and characteristics of literary genres. Poetry is an imaginative awareness of experience expressed through meaning, sound, and rhythmic language choices to evoke an emotional response. It has been known to employ meter and rhyme. The very nature of poetry as an authentic and individual mode of expression makes it nearly impossible to define. Drama is a composition in prose or verse presenting in dialogue or pantomime a story involving conflict or contrast of character, especially on intended to be acted on a stage, a play. It may be any situation or series of events having vivid, emotional, conflicting, or striking interest. Fiction is literature created from the imagination, not presented as fact, though it may be based on a true story or situation. Types of literature in the fiction include the novel, short story, and novella. Non-fiction is based on facts and the author's opinion about a subject. The purpose of non-fiction writing is to inform and sometimes to persuade. Its examples are biographies, articles from textbooks and magazines and newspapers. What are the literary genres in the Philippines? The multiplicity of Philippine literature progressed alongside its rich history. Its themes are rooted in the context of the Philippines' pre-colonial cultural traditions and the socio-political histories of its colonial and contemporary ways. However, some Filipinos encounter unfamiliarity with the literature of the past essentially due to what has been taught upon us, that our country was discovered and, hence, Philippine history began in March 1521. Through the comprehensive works of archaeologists, anthropologists, and ethnologists, we have known more information about our pre-colonial times established against loads of material about early Filipinos as recorded by chroniclers of the past. Let us now look into the different Philippine literary genres that emerged through time. The pre-colonial period. The pre-colonial Filipinos demonstrated rich lived experiences orally expressed in their folk speeches, songs, narratives, and indigenous rituals and mimetic dances. These are passed down from generation to generation. The most common of these are riddles. These are mystifying statements or questions phrased and rhymed to require ingenuity in determining its answer. These are presented as a game and considered as forms of entertainment during the earlier times. Talangaga or metaphor is dominant in any riddles as it discloses subtle comparisons between unlike things, thus, wit and observation are required in this mental exercise. For the Visayans, these are called tigmo, for the Tagalogs, bugtong. For the Ilonos, Pactacan, and for the Bicolanos, Atitatan. Proverbs. These are called sawikan or salawikan in Tagalog or sarsarita in Ilocano. Philippine proverbs are wise sayings that prescribe codes of behavior, mirror societal norms, traditions, and beliefs and impart lessons in brief, rhyming verse. Songs, these are forms of folk lyric speak volumes of the typical rural lives and reflect people's aspirations and lifestyles. Here are some song categories of our ancestors: folk songs, Awitting Bayan. These are songs with lines often described as repetitive, didactic, and sonorous. Lullaby, Oyai, these are soothing songs often sung to put babies to sleep. Serenade, Harana, these are courtship songs used by young men to capture the heart of the girl they love. Chants, Belong, these are used to give respect, excuse, or apology to unseen or other elemental spirits our ancestors believed in to deliver them from danger or harm. Moreover, these are utilized in enchantments and even in witchcraft. Epics, these are long narrative accounts of heroic exploits. Examples of these are Durangian in Marana, Aligwian at Hudhud in Ifugo, Ibalan in Baikal. Myths, these are symbolic narratives, usually of unknown origin and at least partly traditional, that ostensibly relate actual events and are especially associated with religious belief. Ancient Filipino myths include the story of Bathala, and ang Pag-away ng Dagat at Langit. Legends, these are stories that explain the origin of things and phenomena in the surrounding world. Fables, these are brief stories for the children of the native Filipinos. These talk about supernatural or extraordinary people and usually follow in the form of narration that demonstrates a useful truth. These stories use animals as characters to represent a particular attribute or characteristic. One of the most orally narrated Filipino fables is Ang Kunaho at Ang Pagong. Folk tales, Kwentong Bayan, these are stories that deal with the power of nature personified, their submission to a deity, Bathala, and how the deity is responsible for the blessings and the curses in the form of calamities. These are often passed on from generation to generation by word of mouth. The Spanish period, the Spanish colonizers ruled the country for over 300 years. They used the cross to influence and impose their religion upon the natives. For more than 3 centuries of colonization in the Philippines, not only was our history as a nation altered but also our traditions, lifestyles, and belief systems. This has immensely influenced our literature. A shift of interest from writing about nature to writing about the Christian faith, of hymns, saints, miracles, and the teaching of the Church, took place. Most of the writings were religious, secular, and at the latter part, propaganda and revolutionary. Awit, song, these have measures of 12 syllables, dodecasyllabic, and are slowly sung to the accompaniment of a guitar or bandurria. Francisco Baltazar's Florante at Laura is the best example for this. Corrido, these are metrical romances and tales that follow a structure of a poem. These have measures of 8 syllables, octosyllabic, and recited to a martial beat. More often, these are tales of chivalry where a knight saves a princess. Ibang Adarna is an example of this. Karagatan, this is a poetic vehicle of a socio-religious nature celebrated during the death of a person. Duplo, this is a poetic joust in speaking and reasoning. Prose narratives, these are instructional materials that teach Filipinos proper decorum. Pagsusulatan ng Dalawang Binibini na Isa Urbana at Faliza, 1864, is an example. Zarzuela, this is a type of drama that originated in Spain. It includes singing and dancing on stage with lyrics alternatively spoken and sung in operatic and popular styles. The American period, the Philippines had a great leap in education and culture during the American colonization. During their time in the country, public school system was introduced and the usage of both English and Filipino was practiced. The literature during the American period was imitative of the form of American writing. Forms of poetry still followed the old structure but had contents that ranged from free writing and societal concerns under the American regime. Some poems focused on non-traditional themes such that of Jose Corazon de Jesus Mga Gintong Dahan, 1920. This is a collection poem that tackled themes on passion slaying, grief, induced, insanity and lover's suicide. Drama also became popular as it was used to degrade the Spanish rule and immortalized the heroism of Filipinos who fought under the Katipunan. Remake novels also took up Dr. Jose Rizal's portrayal of social conditions under colonial repression. Severino Reyes led the movement to supplant the comedia with a new type of drama, the zarzuela, adaptation of the Spanish zarzuela. Sarswilas such as Juan Abad's Tanikalang Ginto, 1902, Juan Matapang Cruz's Hindi Ako Patay, 1903, and Aurelio Tolentino's Kahapon, Nayon, at Bukas, 1903. The Japanese period and the Republic. With the coming of the Japanese invaders, Philippine literature came to a halt. The English language was banned, and the Filipino language was mandated under Japanese rule. For some, this seemed to be a problem, but for others it was a blessing in disguise. Filipino literature was given a break in this period as many wrote plays, novels, poems, short stories with themes circling on life in the province, the arts, nationalism, and the likes. Many plays were reproduced from English to Tagalog. Writing during the Japanese reign were journalistic in nature. People felt suppressed, but the spirit of nationalism slowly seeped into their consciousness. Thus, essays were composed to glorify Filipinos and to figuratively attack the Japanese. 21st century literature genres. All literary works written and published at the later part of the 21st century, from 2001 onwards, are often characterized as gender-sensitive, technologically eluding, culturally pluralistic, operates on the extreme reality or extreme fiction, and questions conventions and supposedly absolute norms. Just as technology advanced in the 21st century, Filipinos have also adapted, invented, and written some literary innovations far different from before. Philippine literature, nowadays, deals with current themes on technological culture and traces artistic representation of shared experiences. These works are characterized as gender-sensitive, technologically eluding, culturally pluralistic, operates on the extreme reality or extreme fiction, and questions conventions and supposedly absolute norms. There are a lot of new forms from the basic genres of literature, thus, proving how far the literature in the Philippines has gone and how far it will go on from here. The following are the most notable literary genres in the 21st century: illustrated novel, story through text and illustrated images. 50% of the narrative is presented without words, the reader must interpret the images to comprehend the story completely. Textual portions are presented in traditional form. Some illustrated novels may contain no text at all. Span all genres. Examples include The Invention of Hugo Cabret by Brian Selznick and The Arrival by Sean Tan. DG Fiction, triple media literature, combines three media, book, movie/video and internet website. To get the full story, students must engage in navigation, reading, and viewing in all three forms. Patrick Carman's Skeleton Creek and Anthony Zeiker's Level 26 are examples. Graphic novel, narrative in comic book formats, narrative work in which the story is conveyed to the reader using a comic form. The term is employed in broadly manner, encompassing non-fiction works and thematically linked short stories as well as fictional stories across a number of genres. Archie Comics by John Goldwater and illustrator Bob Montana is a good example. Manga, Japanese word for comics, it is used in the English-speaking world as a generic term for all comic books and graphic novels originally published in Japan. Considered as an artistic and storytelling style. Amerimanga, sometimes used to refer to comics created by American artists in manga style. Shonen, boys manga, Naruto, Bleach, One Piece, Shoujo, girls manga, Sailor Moon, Seinen, men's manga, Akira, Josei, women's manga, Loveless, Paradise Kiss, Kodomo, children's manga, Doraemon, Hello Kitty. Doodle fiction, literary presentation where the author incorporates doodle writing, drawings and handwritten graphics in place of the traditional font. Drawing enhances the story, often adding humorous elements. Examples include The Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff Kinney and Timmy Failure by Stefan Pastis. Text talk novels, blogs, email and IM format narratives, stories told almost entirely in dialogue simulating social network exchanges. Chick lit or chick literature is genre fiction which addresses issues of modern womanhood, often humorously and lightheartedly. Chick lit typically features a female protagonist whose femininity is heavily thermalizing in the plot. Scarlett Bailey's The Night Before Christmas and Miranda Dickinson's It Started with a Kiss are examples of this. Flash fiction is a style of fictional literature of extreme brevity. There is no widely accepted definition of the length and category. It could range from word to 1,000. 6-word flash fiction, Ernest Hemingway, For Sale, Baby Socks, Never Worn. Margaret Atwood, longed for him. Got him, shit. Creative nonfiction, also known as literary nonfiction or narrative nonfiction. A genre of writing that uses literary styles and techniques to create factually accurate narratives. Contrasts with other nonfiction, such as technical writing or journalism, which is also rooted in accurate fact, but is not primarily written in service to its craft. As a genre, creative nonfiction is still relatively young and is only beginning to be scrutinized with the same critical analysis given to fiction and poetry. 1000 Gifts by Anne Voskamp and Wind, Sand, and Stars. Science fiction is a genre of speculative fiction dealing with imaginative concepts such as futuristic science and technology, space travel, time travel, faster-than-light travel, a parallel universe and extraterrestrial life. Often explores the potential consequences of scientific and other innovations and has been called a literature of ideas. Examples include Suzanne Collins' Mockingjay and Sarah Moss' Kingdom of Ash. Blog, a weblog, a website containing short articles called posts that are changed regularly. Some blogs are written by one person containing his or her own opinions, interests, and experiences, while others are written by different people. Hyperpoetry, digital poetry that uses links and hypertext markup. It can either involve set words, phrases, lines, etc. that are presented in variable order but sit on the page much as traditional poetry does, or it can contain parts of the poem that move and transform. It is usually found online, through CD-ROM and diskette versions exist. The earliest examples date to no later than the mid-1980s. Spoken word poetry, a poem that has made its way into the hearts and souls of thousands of Filipinos, especially the millennials. It is a type of poem performed or read in artistic and emotive manner which can be accompanied by music or presented in the streets or bars, even cafe shops. It is an oral art that focuses on the aesthetics of wordplay such as intonation and voice inflection. It is a catch-all term that includes any kind of poetry recited aloud, including poetry readings, poetry slams, jazz poetry, and hip-hop, and can include comedy routines and prose monologues. The most viewed YouTube Filipino spoken word artist is Juan Miguel Severo, whose original poems have been performed in TV dramas like On the Wings of Love. Literature context. Context originates from the notion of weaving together. It is defined as the circumstances that form the setting of events, statements, or ideas and in the way of which it can be fully understood and assessed. Reading a literary piece may contribute to the production of the author and the reception of the reader as they appreciate and explore. Context. Anything beyond the specific words of a literary work that may be relevant to understand the meaning. Contexts may be economic, social, cultural, historical, literary, biographical, etc., e.g. the political context of the rule of Elizabeth and James, the religious context of Calvinism, the social context of homosexual relations and cross-dressing, and the literary context of Renaissance literature, for example. All have significant implications for understanding the words of Shakespeare. Writer's context/biographical context. It is knowing about the writer's life, values, assumptions, gender, race, sexual orientation, and the political and economic issues related to the author. In analyzing a text based on its biographical context, you should consider not only how the factors mentioned earlier have caused an impact to the author, but also how these factors were reflected in, and have helped shape, his or her works. It is important to take into consideration the literary background of the author. You must research about who and which the author reads, as these may have also influenced him or her and his or her works. Example: ABNKKBSNPLA Co. is an autobiography detailing author Bob Ong's school days, from his experiences on his first day of primary school to his disastrous university experience and culminating with his entry into the education sector himself, as a teacher. The book is written in Tagalog, the language of the Philippine Islands. The autobiography's long title is meant to be read phonetically, as ABA, Nakakabasa na pala ako? Which when translated to English means, wow, I can actually read now. Bob Ong is Filipino, but the name is a pseudonym, and his true identity is unconfirmed, though several contemporary Filipino authors have been proposed. B. Sociocultural context. It is evident when literary works respond in some way to the society in which they were written, and most often, though not always, that response takes the form of criticism. Sociocultural context is about how a particular literary work depicts society. Sources you might investigate include works, books and articles, of history or sociology that talk about the strengths, weaknesses, and changes occurring in the society during the period in which the literary work is set, and critical works that emphasize the connection between the society and the literary work. Example, ABNKKBSNPLAKO by Bob Ong. It depicts the Filipino culture and, although in a humorous way, reveals the social realities and issues that remain present up until now, namely education, economy, corruption up until personal struggles. The author also leaves audiences with advice regarding life and school in general. B. Sociocultural context. It is evident when literary works respond in some way to the society in which they were written, and most often, though not always, that response takes the form of criticism. Sociocultural context is about how a particular literary work depicts society. Through the fictional novel Singkil recalled the hardships experienced by the Filipinos during the occupation. Singkil was described to be a coward, a supit, or an uncircumcised man who did not only run away from such a ritual of manhood but also evaded his foxhole in Bataan when the Japanese soldiers were closing in. Singkil was a runner or evader throughout much of his lifetime. While being haunted by the poverty of his boyhood and of the treachery that he may have committed in the past. In 1982, Singkil began receiving letters from a Japanese named Haruko Kitamura. C. Linguistic context. It is a discourse that surrounds a language unit and helps to determine its interpretation. Also, it refers to the context within the discourse, that is, the relationship between the words, phrases, sentences, and even paragraphs. Take the word bachelor as an example. We cannot understand the exact meaning of the sentence "he is a bachelor" without the linguistic context to make clear the exact meaning of this word. Enjoy, like, share, subscribe, and click the bell button to be updated to my next video. Yours truly, Mr. Jeffer Mark Vlog. Bye bye, see you to my next video.